Welcome to the Armored Soil Podcast, brought to you by the Renville SWCD, where we look to bring real-life information on all things sustainable resources and agriculture. We believe that soil is invaluable and that protecting our soil is the key to sustainability of all aspects of life. Please like and subscribe to our page wherever you get your podcasts. The information you will hear about is personal experiences and in no way is agronomic advice. If you are interested in implementing the practices or techniques you hear about, we recommend you reach out to your agronomist, NRCS office, or local conservation district for ways to work them into your farming operation. For more information about our liability in our podcast, please visit renvilleswcd.com. With that, this week, we are going to hear from Pamela, Holly, and Kyle as they talk about soil biology and the importance of keeping soil biology active throughout the year, as well as growing your soil biology. We hope you enjoy the conversation. Welcome back to the Armored Soil Podcast. We're here today to talk about soil biology, water quality, and how soil biology and water quality work together to kind of protect our environment, and how increasing your soil biology in your soil kind of can enhance your farming operation or work with your farming operation to make it more sustainable.
Or your garden.
Or your garden.
Or your flower bed.
Or your
whatever.
flower beds or whatever.
Yep.
That's true. So kind of the first thing we want to talk about is kind of what is soil biology, and maybe one of you two want to take that over and just kind of talk the basics of soil biology, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Pam, want to or you want me to?
Sure, I can take a stab at it.
All right.
So soil biology is just all those living organisms that are in that system. It may be as little as bacteria that we can't see with the naked eye. It can be as big as the deer that are eating on your field, or, the little birds that are nesting. And so every little thing that goes into making this entire ecosystem, cycling the nutrients, and even the plants, because they're grabbing those nutrients from the sun and growing. And so just pretty much everything you can think of that could be under a microscope or you can see, that's the soil biology, anything living or breathing.
Mm-hmm. Living and breathing, that's a perfect point, right? So often we're talking that soil is a living organism, right? It's just like us. It's taking in oxygen and moisture and air and letting it out. But just like us, we need good and bad bacteria in our systems to function as well. And just an easy layman's way that we talk about it often is that if you need to be on antibiotics because you're sick, you probably still need a probiotic in that system because your body needs both that good and bad bacteria to function. And the reason you got sick is because there was an imbalance in that system. And that's no different than we're looking at unhealthy soil compared to healthy soil. Unhealthy soil needs to go to the doctor and needs a script, where healthy soil is usually closer to more imbalance.
And what are those prescriptions to kind of help out your soil biology?
Mm-hmm. So if you think about, I kind of tend to go back to the predator-prey system, right? And in that balance of, everything needs to have a food source, everything needs to cycle through that life. And it's like Pam said, it's the tiniest little, can't see it, but under a microscope, nymph, or some sort of bacteria growing in that system, some sort of mycorrhiza fungi, something like that in that system that you can't see with the naked eye, all the way up to the deer roaming across it and dropping fecal matter on its way by, kind of thing.
I do think it's a great analogy, because comparing soil to your actual life and your body.
Yeah.
In order to get our crops, we need our soil to be healthy, and in order for us to live our lives, we need our bodies to be healthy. And how easy it is if you're eating junk food, drinking lots of pop and stuff like that, how quickly your health can decline, and you rely on all these other, taking all these manufactured vitamins and minerals and stuff, is the same way that if you abuse your soils, if you cause constant compaction, if you're breaking up the structure, if you're not allowing it to function how it was made to function, you're going to have to start increasing the amount of fertilizer you put on, increasing the amount of artificials you put into your soil, just like we have to increase that in our bodies if we're not feeling the greatest. Just imagine it's the same way with our soil. And then that all gets uptaken into the root, into our crops, and eventually into our bodies, and it just becomes this ever never ending cycle of just. And that's one of the things I want to talk about today is, why do you think as an agriculture community we've kind of gotten away from focusing on our soil biology? Because it all starts with our soil. I mean, soil is an invaluable resource, but why do we not treat it like that? Why do we take it for granted? Maybe.
Yeah, before we answer that question, I want to circle back to your comments right there about that imbalance. Point that we always try to bring forward is it didn't happen overnight, so it isn't going to recover overnight. And it's no different than us with our human health, right? If you're under the weather and sick, it just takes time to recover.
It's way easier to break things than to grow things.
Exactly, right? And so that's the piece of it too. Like we can, and I'm not trying to be pessimistic, because we can see awesome change in a growing season.
Oh, yeah.
But also, like, we can't expect instant results and instant gratification. It all has to be part of that intentional system.
Yeah.
So why did we get away from that? That's kind of a dangerous question, Kyle. I think, are you wanting people to come in and throw eggs at us in the office? Is that what you're after?
Might as well.
So
I think it's a question that needs to be answered.
I do too.
It lies in the root. That's a good pun.
Yeah.
In the root of kind of what we're dealing with and what we're going to be dealing with going forward as we deal with greater climate variability and everything like that.
Yeah. I think it's multifaceted, and I think there's so many moving pieces to it. I think part of it is a larger scale industry piece, as far as, equipment manufacturers and just kind of that messaging side of things. I also think that operations have gotten really big.
Oh, yeah.
And the scale can be challenging, where if you can reach out to your co-op and say, I need you to spray my cornfields, and these are the cornfields, and it's the same prescription across the board, is that maybe an easier lift than where you've got interseeded cover crops in this cornfield you don't have anything seeded today, but you want to aftermath graze it and put some livestock out there this fall. So I think that's part of it, right? As humans, the easy button
Convenience
is convenient, and it is like, it's just and so I don't mean to imply farmers are lazy. That's not it. They're one of the hardest working industries. It's just that maybe I think it's multi-level. I also think there is a very significant disconnect in the consumer of what is being produced.
Oh, for sure.
There's just books and paper after paper of historically the nutrient density that was grown on healthy soils compared to less healthy soils. And I think we've kind of lost focus of that and really been looking more at overall total yield versus what has been produced.
Yeah, and kind of hit on that nutrient density. We're not going to get into it today, but stick with us. We'll get to it on
We'll
a
get
future
to it.
podcast. But what about you, Pam? What do you think about kind of the agriculture industry as a whole, and maybe how do you think we can get back to focusing on soil biology?
So I think it kind of goes back to what you were kind of saying about, it's that instant gratification of it. I mean, if you can till and you can get some nitrogen that's released as that fungi that was built last year, that built up, and now you till it and then it's releasing, it's decomposing, so you get that nitrogen. It's that instant gratification of, I can see that, I can measure that, I know that that's happening. But I think that disconnect happened because what we're trying to talk about, what we're trying to say with, the mycorrhizal fungi building continually in a no-till system, it's hard to measure that sometimes. It's not very well studied. It's better studied in trees and things like that. There's not a lot of trusted resources right now with what we have, but I think there's that push coming for it. And I think it's really good that we're pushing it and that we're seeing more institutions that are getting excited about soil health and trying to measure it and trying to figure out how we can get this data for farmers so we can kind of build back into it, because we've seen it. We've seen that there's that nitrogen buildup. We've seen that organic matter is building up, and that people are maybe spending a little less on fertilizer because their soil's doing it for them without having to do the tillage.
And there's farmers in Renville County that go to strip till or no till right away, and they automatically are able to cut their fertilizer intake in half.
Mhm.
And just think about that, what that can do for an operation as a whole, and the money that you save, and where you could put it towards different equipment payments or something like that. And I think this is kind of missed on when we get talking about soil health a lot is, yes, it's well documented that it's more profitable if you switch to a more soil health related system, regenerative, sustainable, whatever you want to call it, all those different buzzwords. But I think the other thing is it's the time, and there's a little bit more management that's involved in this system. And you have to really, and I, we probably do a poor job of explaining that, but I think it is missed on that because you need to make sure that your cover crop mix is doing what you want. There's so much that you can do with organisms and different plants to increase what um, what soil microbes are going to be there, what you're taking in from the earth, what you're photosynthesizing. And yeah, it's easy for everybody to just go do rye, but you're not getting that much from the rye, as you could be getting if you were doing like triticale and kale and adding a 4 or 5-way mix, and even up to, as you get into it, 15 to 20-way mixes. And that's when you really start to see it. But it also it takes time to get comfortable with that, like you're saying. It's convenience, it's instant gratification. I think it's a lot, and trying to just break that stigma and getting people more excited. And I think it's more of like a buy-in for your operation, where you realize that it's more of a legacy thing, that you want to be able to pass that down, and just finding that context and being able to pass it down from generation to generation. I think trying to figure out a way to get that across the two farmers is kind of a big thing.
So you talked about that balance, right? Of you
Mhm.
getting to this higher mix of now you're looking at 10 or 15 things. Just rewind and think about our historic landscape here in Renville
Mhm.
County, tall grass prairie historically. And so we had something photosynthesizing almost all the time. We had warm and cool seasons, we had broadleaves, we had grasses, and that's exactly what that cover crop scenario is doing for you. But the other piece of that, Pam mentioned that it's been studied more in trees, but that symbiotic communication system amongst those roots in that native prairie setting, that's exactly what you can get in a diverse cover crop mix, where it's actually saying, okay, we need to pull more micronutrients from lower in the soil profile. Or, oh, wait a minute, there's some phosphorus that's tied up in this profile. If I put in some buckwheat, I can help release some of that phosphorus that's tied up in my profile. So there's like all these pieces tying together in that biology, and Mother Nature's got it figured out. We're just here to try and help figure out how to make that recipe so she can recreate that scenario.
Exactly to Kyle's point is, think about if you're trying to go on a diet or you're trying to improve your healthy lifestyle, again, relating it back to human health. You aren't just going to jump in and start going to the gym 6 days a week, 7 days a week, and working out for 3 hours a day, and you're not going to completely cut out carbs. Like, it's not a complete 180 overnight, and just it takes time. You got to start small, and I mean, maybe it is just a one species overwintering mix to start with, and that itself kind of jump starts the system. It's not you have to jump 100% in all the way every single field, but just that slow build up into it. And so not being scared of trying it on one little field that maybe you don't get great yield on anyway, just try it.
Yeah.
So just not being afraid to do little things.
I was doing a rainfall simulator a couple weeks ago for a group of individuals, and there was a system. It was just strip tilled for 2 or 3 years only, and I flipped that over, and there was already in February 4 or 5 night crawlers that were in that, and that's only 3 years of a strip till system, so not even a full no till. Not really a diverse cover crop mix out there either, just strip till and rye in the wintertime. And that's kind of what Pam's saying, is you're going to see those differences right away. And I think that's another thing as we talk about instant gratification with tillage. And I think getting the mindset to go like instant gratification of seeing, like, it's kind of nerded out or whatever, but seeing all the biology change, seeing herds of deer come to your field in the middle of winter, seeing the earthworms, seeing the pheasant populations just go skyrocket and stuff in the fall and the wintertime. And I think that's a way is that goes back to soil health helps with everything. It all aspects of life, wildlife, water quality, farming. everything. And that
Public
goes,
safety from wind erosion.
well, that's the thing. And that
Yeah.
runs back to, it just is every aspect of life, and kind of what we've been talking about for this entire podcast so far. Everything we do in life relates back to our soil. And without armoring our soil and protecting it, we're losing so much that we rely upon. And it's just a slow death every year. And we just don't realize it. And we take it for
Yeah.
granted. So
something that relates right back to that is our water, right? So where does the majority of outstate Minnesota water come from? Groundwater, right? Obviously in the metro, they're pulling from the river. That's a different scenario, but groundwater. So raindrop hits the soil surface. Eventually it's getting down to our groundwater. So that's a big piece of it too. It's all through that cycle, like you're describing, that I want to open my tap and have safe, healthy water to drink. But at the same time, how did it get there? And yes, we can reverse osmosis and we can filter and we can add minerals back in after we take minerals out. But if we can maybe kind of reduce some of that on the front end and make sure that it's less damage or less contamination when it comes out of the tap, or none even. Can you imagine that? Like, it'd be pretty cool too.
well, and we're blessed in our area. We have such good aquifer supply. But when you start talking about the Southeast and what they deal with in the karst region, having soil health allows your infiltration rates to go up and really is a direct benefit to water quality, because where we're at in Rainfall County in southwest Minnesota, when we do get those big rain events, how much of that rain is actually recharging the aquifer?
Right.
Very minimal, because like when you watch the rainfall simulators, when you see all the erosion that happens, most of it's surface runoff and not infiltrating through the soil into our aquifers. And most of it's going through drain tile into our ditches. And so I think that's one thing that is also missed with soil health is like the water quality benefits. Yeah, we see what it does for crops and the less like fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides we're having to use. But the water quality benefits, because we have that soil structure, we're able to hold that water, increase that water holding capacity, and filter that water as it goes through, filtering out those nitrogens and allow nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and allowing it to actually, our crops and our microbes to uptake that and utilize it, rather than just all getting brushed off the surface into our water courses, eventually into the Mississippi River and Minnesota River. So I think that's another thing that's missed, because granted, we probably don't care about it. Our audience doesn't really care about it as much, but I think if we had the groundwater issues that are in other parts like South Dakota or North Dakota and those dry climates, we would see it a lot more. And that's why I think you saw that push for more soil health out there as well, more intensive grazing systems.
And I think out in the western states, they're dealing with 11 to 15 inches of rain annually too. So part of that was to capture and keep that raindrop. And you're right, very little of it actually gets all the way through that aquifer. But the concept of getting it through a clean system versus a dirty system.
For sure.
So Kyle mentioned the rainfall simulator. I would put a shameless plug in to go to our YouTube channel, Renville SWCD on YouTube. And we have a video of the rainfall simulator demonstrating exactly what Kyle's describing. And it is super visual, because you literally could drink the water running off of a vegetated system or a healthy soil system, as far as the clarity goes, versus a system that is continually having that soil structure and biology destroyed with tillage and conventional, maybe commercial fertilizer, things of that. And don't get me wrong, we are not saying everybody needs to go organic. We're not saying stop doing anything on your field with commercial fertilizer. That's not it. It's all about just thinking about that system and being really intentional that what I'm doing might be harming this piece of my system. Is this worth the overall gain long term? So
and there is some interesting research that's coming out too that's actually showing that regenerative systems are almost a lot healthier for the consumer than in a full organic system, because you have all this natural environment, natural microbes that are contributing to your plants that are being grown. So that's the trade-off. I mean, a little bit of chemicals probably okay if it's going to be healthier in the long run.
Especially if you're building up your organic matter. That organic matter is breaking down your pesticides so much quicker than if you're tilling. And so then maybe it's not affecting your cover crop as much, because it's breaking down quicker, and then it's not staying in our food as long. And so I think just overall, we're seeing that building up your organic matter by doing soil health principles is going to help with so many other factors that we don't initially consider, or at least I didn't initially consider when I first started talking about soil health.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I gotta chime in, Kyle. I'm so
Go for
sorry.
it,
When we talk about biology too, right? Pam touched on it. It's not just in that soil profile. It's not just the things that we can't see or the large things that we can see, like the deer walking across the landscape. Dr. Jonathan Lundgren has some really compelling data and research around that impact of specifically our bee population and how they're basically taking in those neonicotinoids into their system and holding on to them for their life cycle and basically then creating this slow death, but yet like that it's just compounding and building and it's not leaving that system. And so I think that's really important too. Like everything has stages, right? And everything ebbs and flows, but to think about something that you might be doing on your garden or on your field on a scale is having more than just this day's impact, more than just this week's impact, like the whole life cycle of this insect.
Mm-hmm. And to piggyback on that, he's also researching in mule deer populations, and I don't remember if it's Montana or Wyoming.
Yeah.
But it's on the fertility of males.
Yep.
And the ability for them to reproduce, and they're finding that these neonics are causing these mule deer to not be able to reproduce.
And they're sterilizing them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just think
I
about
had seen that.
like as a population and like when we're eating from the store and stuff like that, we're not that far removed from mule deer.
Right.
We're very similar mammals, everything like that. And like it's just kind of scary and eye-opening of what happens with the different types of neonics and everything. That's kind of what, because not everybody always cares about the bees or whatever, but a lot of people care about big game and hunting and deer hunting, and think about what that can do to our populations there.
Well, and regionally, maybe we don't focus that much on the bees, but California almond industry, make or break bee population. A lot of fruit trees down in Texas, some of that. But I mean, even your garden, a bee needs to visit your cucumber blossom multiple times to pollinate it so you can have a cucumber in your garden. It might not always be a bee. It could be any of the other pollinators, bats, butterflies, things of that nature. But if you just think about how many times they have to keep going back to actually make that a successful pollination to grow a cucumber in your garden. I love gardening and I love being outside, but I am not running around with a Q-tip and self-pollinating my cucumber blossoms.
Yeah. I don't think I'd have time for that.
Yeah. So I think that's a piece of it too. It's that the biology is everywhere. It's beneath our feet. It's in the air around us. And just to kind of be thinking about that system.
Yeah, maybe I think I want to touch on too is like how water can increase by keeping that water in your soil profile and really how that allows the biology to prosper. Because I feel a lot of times it's get water, let's get it to the ditches as quick as possible. But there's also, we're experiencing greater rainfall events in the spring and longer, hotter, drier summers with variable rainfall events where we get maybe 6 to 10 inches in a day. By keeping some of that water in the soil profile, what it can do for biology as well as obviously we want moisture for our crops, but kind of let's talk about that a little bit.
So I guess my thoughts on that is for every 1% of organic matter you have, you can hold just over 22,000 gallons of water. And so that organic matter is holding it, it's binding it, it's connecting to these soil particles instead of not being able to penetrate because it's already saturated and there's no more oxygen left. And so that's going to affect your bacteria. That's going to encourage anaerobic bacteria. And sure, like Holly was saying, you need the diversity, but you want the diversity. You don't want one to dominate over the other.
Yeah.
And so just making sure that you're not having that ponding and you're not, rushing to get the water out of your system. And every time you have that water that's holding in your organic matter, your plants are going to be able to use that for longer and they'll be able to photosynthesize more and then they can feed the biology more consistently throughout the season instead of, okay, I have water, so I can feed you for a week. Okay, now I have to kind of like slow down, go dormant. And then the biology isn't getting as much food because the plants can't photosynthesize and give it the exudates. I mean, just the consistency when you have more organic matter that can hold that water is really good for the biology there.
And I think your pore space allows it to still breathe.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Where you have this pore space in your soil structure, like cottage cheese, like that we always talk about, it's allowed to breathe even though it's saturated.
Mm-hmm. Just like us, right? It needs to breathe, it needs to take in nutrients, it needs to take in water. And that's back to Pam's point about that, right? Then it can be consistently feeding. We like to eat all every day, right? And it's important that we do, back to Kyle's point about the health side of it. The biology is no different. That system needs to be constantly feeding or have the opportunity to feed to continue to thrive. So does that mean we get to do your visual aid now or not?
Yeah, I think one way to really see your biology at work and to see if your system is going is it's called the Soil Your Undies experiment.
What? I don't know about that.
And it's a way that you can get your air out your dirty laundry. But so basically what happens is you bury a pair of whitey tighties, brand new. They can have to be 100% cotton briefs. And all you have to do is just dig a narrow trench, bury the undies in the top 6 inches of your soil profile. Leave them there for 4 to 6 weeks is usually a good amount of time. Don't touch them. Hopefully a raccoon doesn't come and bury them up.
We've had that happen.
It's happened before. But then after that 4 to 6 weeks, you go unbury it and you can go see what the biology has to do. And we'll kind of talk to our YouTube audience here, but also kind of give some visuals to our audience, give some word visuals to our audience on podcast. So here we have our Soil the Undies experiment. And it's 4 different trials. We have 2 years of no-till with cover crops after wheat. It's a corn-soybean rotation with spring wheat as well. Complete no-till for the last 2 years. In this one, we have 5 years strip-till, no-till with cover crops, corn, soybean, and wheat rotation. Cover crops were interseeded into V5 corn after wheat harvest. We have 5 years strip-till, no-till. On the bottom here, we have 2 years of strip-till, no-till with cover crops. We have corn strip-tilled in the fall prior to soybeans, and the soybeans were no-tilled. And then we have cover crops that were interseeded at corn at V5 stage. And then here we have a straight conventional field. Corn soybean rotation, fall chisel plow on soybeans, and a fall corn ripper with spring field cultivator on both corn and soybeans. When we look here, you can really tell the vast difference of the trials. So I don't know if Holly or Pam, if you kind of want to talk to our podcast audience about what we're seeing here, that'd be great.
Yeah. So the biology is what consumes that cotton. So like Kyle said, it's important that it's 100% cotton. So you could use anything, a hunk of fabric. The reason we partially like the undies is because when you get back, you can still actually find this elastic band because they don't consume that. But this is the function of that soil biology in a system where we have minimal disturbance of that soil structure. So we're not destroying their home. We have a colleague that loves to say every time you do tillage, it's like a tornado running through your house. And it's pretty much that concept, right? You destroy the structure and now they have to rebuild it. And so in this system, they've got a great home, sturdy walls, nice stick built. And then they also have a fridge full of food because you're adding that crop rotation with a cover crop in that system that's having a long growing window. Kyle mentioned that that's got wheat in that rotation. So the wheat is harvested early, like August, and then they've got like 2 months or 7 to 8 weeks of growing cover crops that are photosynthesizing well into the fall. So that's like ideal food source, right? Strong house.
We're trying to emulate our landscape back in
exactly
pre-settlement where we have all these different roots intermingle, intertwine, that our biology is able to feed off of. Just do a lot of benefits for your soil that turn into benefits for your farming operation.
Exactly. Stable home, lots of food. It's just that simple, right? And so then these other 2 are similar variations of that where we've got a strip till system. And so a strip till, for those that maybe aren't familiar, is where you would actually be doing tillage in a 5 to 7 inch zone, right, where the seed is going to be placed the next growing season. And then in between those rows, the residue is left there in place and intact to armor the soil. And so strip till is really a great option when you're looking at soil health. It's very minimal till, but still disturbance. And so in this system, we also have a small grain with cover crops that are grown early, planted early. So you've got a long window of food, but you can see just that small amount of tillage in that zone where the seed is going to go, not the same benefit for the biology anyway, right? There's just not as big a house, right? So this is a 2-story and they're maybe living in a single ranch on this one or something like that, right? And so that's kind of our difference. And then again, if we go to a strip till, no till with covers, and we're looking at a less diverse crop rotation, just corn and soybeans, less biology. This guy here, the challenge is
Throw them in the washer and you can still wear them.
Many people have wanted to take them off the board, but we won't let them. And that's the piece of it, right? Is that we don't have that soil structure to build the home for the biology. And in just a corn soybean rotation, like Kyle said, we really have gotten far away from what that historic tall grass prairie is. And we're not saying plant everything to grass, turn your bison loose and your livestock, and we'll go back pre-settlement. That's not practical. But there is really a balance to be struck somewhere between all of these undies where we can really be promoting that biology, increase your soil organic matter, water holding capacity, available nutrients. It all just comes from the biology as well.
I think to go back to Pam's point, instant gratification, this is 2 years on that no-till with cover crops after
Right.
wheat, and there's hardly anything left of that pair of underwear. There's your instant gratification. Just find it somewhere else. And I
Right.
think that's one big thing we're trying to not push or anything like that. I don't know a good way to frame it, but
Cajole.
trying to convey
Yep.
is that there are other ways where we can find gratification and you can see the soil actually working for you.
Mhm.
It's just in different ways than fluffy, black, completely nothing there, clean seed bed.
And it's just what they're comfortable with. I mean, when
Right.
you grow up and you're on the farm and you see that every single day, it's hard to learn something new because it's uncomfortable. It really is. It's a lot of uncomfortable conversations and just uncomfortable going to these meetings and trying to learn about it because you feel so out of your element because you're an ace and you're conventional field maybe, but you have no idea what questions to ask or what really there is to some of this stuff.
Exactly.
So it can just be a mental frustration there too, and learning to know who to ask and know that we won't judge or care whatever quote unquote stupid question you have.
Right.
We're here for it.
Well, there's
It's
a
human
book title.
nature though. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
There's a book title for you two to work on whenever you want to become an author. Uncomfortable Conversations with a Strip Tiller or a No-Tiller.
There we go. We will start
Perfect.
working on that. Yeah, our biographers will give them that
Yes.
feedback. But as far as human nature, what are the hardest 2 things to do? Admit when you're wrong and change. And so it's not an implication that dad or grandpa or grandma or anybody was doing it wrong either. It's just we know so much more now, right? And it's just a different time, and that's really, but that's the piece of it. Like Pam said, it's uncomfortable. It's just awkward, but yet it's okay to say like maybe we didn't have all the answers, and maybe it's okay to grow and change. I do find the farmers that we're working with in this space really blossom, for lack of a better terminology, and maybe you guys can figure out another phrase for that, but really like just that opportunity to have a support network and a system where you can go to this meeting and talk with somebody or listen, hop on a podcast and hear these 3 employees ramble on for the afternoon.
Yeah, and I think the cool thing is seeing, I mean, we work with farmers that are in their 80s and their willingness to adopt this and change their perspective. And really, it's just like a light bulb switches because they see their neighbor doing it or they heard about it in the radio or read about it in the newspaper. And I think that's the cool thing too, because everybody's always like, oh, technology is pushing out the older generation. But really, some of the most technological advanced farmers that I work with are 60, 70 years old. And just watching them and seeing them prosper and blossom, as Holly said, is just really fun. And that's really, I think, what the three of us really enjoy the most, is being able to make an impact on a farming operation in a positive way that helps them see instant gratification through seeing how their biology is changing, how their soil is changing, as well as seeing them realize that, yeah, my grandkids and great grandkids are going to be able to continue this because of what the changes I'm doing today.
Mm-hmm. One of our soil health farmers in the county that's been transitioning for about 7-ish years loves to go fishing with his grandkids. And now he never has to buy worms anymore.
Yeah.
He jokes that like all they got to do is give one of the grandkids a shovel and they can get enough worms to go fishing. And even that, like just that process of now we don't have to stop. Not that you don't want to support a local business, but just that interaction as a family too, and that biological balance with the family to go out there and dig around. And there's also been study after study of the benefit of us just putting our hands in the soil. And if you can get that started at a young age, because you get to go fishing with grandpa.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what we got for today's episode. Pam, closing thoughts on soil biology? And
I think it's really important. I think it's important to ask, maybe, like I said, the uncomfortable questions. Ask anything you might wonder about, and maybe it's some weird outlandish idea that you think is, way out there, but it's something we've heard, something we've thought about. Maybe it's questions of more about the nutrient density that we talked about. So just anything you have an interest in, we'd likely have some sort of tie to help you figure out your questions, because there's people really getting into the soil health world and discovering the biology. And it's really, really cool to see more people get excited about it.
What about you, Holly? Closing thoughts?
I think it's so all interconnected, right? It's just every piece flows into the next. And I find that with all of our podcasts that we pick a topic, right? And it was biology, but we're talking about organic matter, which is biology, but then we're talking about humans. I just think the biology piece is really fun and exciting, and it's so visual.
Yeah.
For other pieces, I think it's hard. You can collect samples and do this, but the biology, everybody can go and get a pack of Undies and bury them in your garden and bury them in your grove, in the trees where there's perennial cover. And you can do that on your own property, on your own yard, and just see that visual change. So the biology excites me because it's so visual, and I'm a visual learner.
And with me, I think everything relates back to the soil biology. Without the soil biology, we just have dirt.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And dirt's not doing anything for you. Soil is doing something for you. So the more we can focus on that soil biology, we're going to see all these other benefits. You're going to see your water quality benefits. We're going to see the nutrient density benefits. We're going to start seeing less reliance on artificial synthetics and stuff, all of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
So everything relates back to soil. Everything relates back to soil biology. And that's what we're going to keep honing on and keep bringing to you all. So thanks for joining in on our conversation today, and hopefully you keep listening, and we'll talk to you soon.
See ya.
Thank you.